There is a list that engineers do not talk about at conferences. It does not appear in the curriculum of any major engineering school. It is not classified. It is not locked in any government archive. It sits in plain sight, scattered across museum basements and academic journals and archaeological reports that almost nobody reads. It is a list of technologies that existed before 1850, technologies that were built by human hands. Technologies that were used, documented, and in some cases are still physically present and available for examination right now. And if you brought the blueprints for any one of them to the most advanced engineering firm operating today, with access to every material science tool and computational resource the 21st century has produced, and asked them to reproduce it exactly, they would hand the papers back. Not because it would take too long, not because it would cost too much. They would say they do not know how. That phrase is the one that should stop you. We can sequence the human genome. We can build instruments sensitive enough to detect gravitational waves produced by colliding black holes a billion light years away. We can edit the fundamental chemistry of living cells. And there are things built by human hands before the Industrial Revolution that we cannot reproduce. Not with difficulty, not at great expense. We cannot reproduce them because something in the knowledge itself is missing. Something that was understood once, held within specific traditions, passed forward through specific chains of transmission, and then lost when those chains broke. This video is about 10 of those things, but it is not really about the technologies. It is about the pattern they form when you look at them together. And about what that pattern suggests about the world that was here before the one we were taught to believe, is the beginning of the story. The first technology does not look impressive when you encounter it. You have probably walked past it in photographs without registering what you were looking at. It is concrete. Specifically the concrete that Roman engineers poured into harbor structures and breakwaters along the Mediterranean coast nearly 2,000 years ago. The reason it belongs on this list is not because it survived. Stone survives. The reason it belongs on this list is because it is stronger today than the day it was poured. Modern concrete begins developing microfractures within decades of curing. The infrastructure holding together the cities of the developed world right now is in a slow, continuous process of structural degradation. Engineers know this. It is why bridge inspection and highway reconstruction consume hundreds of billions of dollars every year in every country with aging built infrastructure. The Romans did not have this problem. Their formula used volcanic ash from a region near Naples called Pozzuoli, mixed with seawater and lime. By any conventional materials logic, this combination should have produced something brittle and porous. Instead, it produced something that became harder over time through a chemical process that seawater itself drove forward. Marine researchers studying Roman harbor ruins found tobermorite crystals growing spontaneously inside the concrete matrix. Tobermorite is a rare mineral that normally forms only under high-temperature geological conditions. It was growing at the bottom of the sea inside 2,000-year-old Roman construction. Material scientists published a detailed analysis of this in 2017. They described the chemistry precisely. They confirmed what was happening at the molecular level. And then they acknowledged something that the paper buried in technical language, but that is impossible to miss if you read carefully. They cannot reproduce it. The specific volcanic ash cannot simply be substituted. The ratios have never been definitively recovered. The curing process is unknown. Several teams have attempted partial reconstructions. None have matched the compressive strength of the surviving Roman originals. We cannot make concrete as good as what Roman engineers were pouring into harbors before the birth of Christ. The follow-up question is the one that matters. The Romans did not develop this formula. They were administrators and military engineers who inherited knowledge from the Greeks, who inherited from the Egyptians, who inherited from something older still. The chain of transmission runs backward into a past the official record cannot see clearly, and when Rome fell, that chain broke. The formula thinned and disappeared as the civilization that held it came apart. The concrete is still hardening in Mediterranean harbors. The knowledge of how it was made is gone. Damascus steel was produced in the Middle East between roughly the 3rd century and the early 18th century. If you have ever held a blade forged from genuine Damascus steel, and almost no one alive today has, you would know it immediately not from the surface pattern, though the flowing water-like grain is unlike anything produced by any other metalworking tradition, but from how it behaves. European steel of the same period shattered against Damascus blades in combat. A Damascus edge was sharp enough that a silk scarf dropped horizontally onto it would separate cleanly under nothing but its own weight and momentum. The blades were flexible enough to bend nearly 90 degrees without fracturing and harder than almost anything else being produced by human metallurgy at the time. Production stopped around 1750. The most common explanation involves the disruption of specific ore trade routes from India and the simultaneous loss of the craftsmen who knew how to work that ore. But this explanation has never fully satisfied researchers because the properties of Damascus steel are not a simple function of ore composition. They are a function of what was done to that ore during the forging process. When modern metallurgists began analyzing authentic Damascus blade samples, using electron microscopy, they found something that stopped them. Carbon nanotubes inside the steel. Carbon nanotubes were considered a landmark nanotechnology discovery when materials scientists first produced them in laboratory conditions in the late 20th century. They are present in blades forged by hand in open furnaces in medieval workshops before the discovery of electricity. The current hypothesis is that specific impurities in the original ore under precise thermal cycling self-organized at the nanoscale into these structures, but the thermal cycling process itself is unknown. The temperatures, the timing, the quenching medium, the sequence. Individual researchers have produced steel samples with nanotube-like inclusions. Nobody has produced a blade that matches the mechanical properties of the historical originals. The knowledge of how to do this was held within a specific tradition of craftsmen who passed it forward through direct instruction. When the last generation of those craftsmen died without successors, the knowledge did not survive in any form that could be reconstructed from what they left behind. In 1901, sponge divers working off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera pulled pieces of what they initially thought was unusually shaped rock from the wreck of an ancient cargo ship lying on the seafloor. The pieces were bronze, corroded almost beyond recognition, encrusted with 2,000 years of marine growth. For decades nobody knew what they were looking at. X-ray imaging in the 1970s and later CT scanning revealed the interior. More than 30 interlocking gears, precision machined, assembled into a computing device of extraordinary sophistication. The Antikythera mechanism is an analog astronomical computer. It predicted the positions of the sun and moon. It calculated eclipse cycles. It tracked the movements of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye. It modeled astronomical periods, the Metonic cycle, the Saros cycle, the Exeligmos cycle, that require precise long-term observation and advanced mathematics to identify and encode. The gear ratios embedded in the device are accurate to a fraction of a percent against modern astronomical measurements. It was built sometime between 150 and 100 BCE. The manufacturing tolerances required to produce this device were not matched by European clockmaking until the 14th century at the earliest. Modern researchers have built physical reconstructions using CNC machining and contemporary astronomical data. The reconstructions function. But building a working replica with modern tools and modern knowledge is not the same thing as understanding how ancient craftsmen built the original with the tools and the knowledge available in 100 BCE. The more significant problem is what surrounds the mechanism. There is nothing before it that explains how it was built. No lineage of increasingly sophisticated geared devices leading up to it. No documented tradition of the precision metalworking it required. No successor technology demonstrating that the knowledge persisted after it was made. It appears in the archaeological record as if from nowhere, a single surviving specimen of what was almost certainly a tradition of instrument making, and then it disappears. The tradition that produced it left almost no other trace, which means the tradition was far larger than what survived it, and what happened to the rest of it is a question the official record cannot answer. Antonio Stradivari made violins in Cremona, Italy between roughly 1680 and his death in 1737. Approximately 650 of those instruments survive. They are valued today at between $5 and $20 million each, not because of age, not because of historical significance in the abstract sense, because of what they do acoustically that nothing made since can match. Controlled blind listening tests in which professional violinists and music researchers evaluate instruments without knowing which is which have consistently found that Stradivarius instruments produce something different, not just better in a quantifiable sense, different in a way that trained ears detect immediately, and that measurement has struggled to fully characterize. Researchers have analyzed the varnish. The chemical composition of the varnish on Stradivarius instruments has never been fully identified despite extensive analysis using contemporary methods. They have analyzed the wood, spruce and maple grown during the Little Ice Age when reduced temperatures slowed growth rates and produced denser, more acoustically consistent material. They have proposed that Stradivari treated the wood with mineral salts that altered its acoustic properties in ways current materials science cannot fully model. Every proposed explanation has produced reconstruction attempts by skilled modern luthiers working from CT scans of originals. None of those reconstructions have been judged equivalent to the originals under controlled conditions. Whatever Stradivari was doing, the combination of material selection, preparation technique, varnish formula, and the accumulated geometric intuition of a lifetime of instrument making, it did not survive him. His sons worked in his workshop, his students observed his methods, and the knowledge still did not transmit in the form that mattered. This is the pattern that runs through every technology on this list. The knowledge was not written down in a form that preserved what mattered most. It lived in hands and eyes, and the accumulated physical memory of craftsmen who had spent decades learning to feel what correct was. And when those people were gone, the knowledge was gone with them. Sacsayhuaman sits above Cusco in Peru, and it presents a problem that grows larger the more carefully you examine it. The fortress complex is constructed from limestone blocks. The largest individual blocks weigh an estimated 360 tons. The largest mobile crane in widespread commercial use today has a maximum lifting capacity of around 1,200 tons under ideal prepared conditions, with a specialist team and significant setup time. Moving a 360-ton block across uneven Andean terrain and up a hillside is a categorically different engineering problem than lifting it under controlled conditions. The blocks fit together without mortar. The joints between them have been measured to sub-centimeter tolerances, and the blocks are not rectangular. They are polygonal, each one a unique shape with complex interlocking faces that fit against their specific neighbors with the precision of a three-dimensional puzzle in which every piece was made for its exact position. Modern engineers who have studied this have proposed ramps, rollers, and large organized labor forces. These proposals are plausible in principle and have never been successfully demonstrated in practice at anywhere near the required scale. The precision of the jointing is the hardest part to explain within any conventional framework. Shaping each unique polygonal face to match its specific neighbor to sub-centimeter accuracy across irregular three-dimensional surfaces requires either an advanced cutting and measuring technology we have not identified at the site or a material process that allowed the stone to be shaped in a non-solid state and hardened in place. French chemist Joseph Davidovits spent decades analyzing pyramid and megalithic samples and found chemical signatures consistent with casting rather than quarrying in a meaningful number of cases. If he is correct, the technology that built some of these structures was not organized labor. It was material science, a chemistry of stone, a process for creating artificial limestone that when set is chemically indistinguishable from natural rock without specialized analysis. A process that nobody has recovered. The Iron Pillar of Delhi has been standing in the courtyard of the Quip complex since at least the 4th century CE. It is approximately 7 meters tall. It weighs more than 6 tons. It is made of iron. And after 1,600 years of continuous exposure to the monsoon climate of the Indian subcontinent, a climate characterized by alternating wet and dry cycles that accelerate iron corrosion more aggressively than almost any other atmospheric condition on Earth, it shows almost no rust. The surface has developed a thin, stable patina. The structural metal beneath is intact. Metallurgists who analyzed the pillar's composition found an unusually high phosphorus concentration, around 0.25% compared to less than 0.05% in modern structural iron. Under the specific alternating wet and dry conditions of the Delhi climate, this phosphorus content causes the formation of a thin protective layer of iron hydrogen phosphate on the surface that inhibits further oxidation. The layer is self-renewing. As conditions change, it reforms. It is a corrosion protection system built into the material at the compositional level rather than applied as a coating. The remarkable thing is not just that this works. It is that producing it required precise control over the phosphorus content of the iron during smelting, which means someone understood, at least functionally, what high phosphorus iron did under those specific environmental conditions well enough to produce it deliberately at scale. Modern metallurgists have not produced a rust-resistant iron alloy using the same principles because the phosphorus concentration that protects the Delhi pillar makes modern structural iron brittle and unsuitable for construction. The specific combination of composition and microstructure that gives the pillar corrosion resistance without sacrificing structural integrity has not been recovered. The pillar keeps standing. The knowledge of how it was made does not stand with it. Newgrange in Ireland is approximately 5,200 years old. It is a stone passage tomb, according to the official classification, oriented so that the rising sun on the winter solstice sends a shaft of light through a narrow opening above the entrance passage and illuminates the chamber at the center. Researchers studying its acoustic properties found something that is rarely discussed outside specialist circles. The central chamber sustains specific frequency resonances, particularly in the range of 110 to 120 Hz, at unusually high intensities. These frequencies correspond to the range of the human male voice during sustained ritualistic chanting. They also correspond to frequencies that neuroscience research has linked to specific changes in brain activity, reduced activity in the neocortex, increased activity in older, more instinctual brain structures, measurable shifts in the neurological state of people present in the space. The chamber was not only oriented to capture sunlight on a specific morning each year, it was acoustically tuned to alter the consciousness of the people gathered inside it. The cave complex at Lascaux in France contains Paleolithic paintings more than 17,000 years old. Researchers who mapped the acoustic properties of the caves found a systematic correspondence between the locations of painted animals and the locations of maximum acoustic resonance within the rock. The sections most densely covered in painted imagery are the sections that echo most dramatically. The paintings were placed where the sound was. This was documented by researchers in the 1980s and remains one of the least discussed significant findings in the study of prehistoric human behavior. The great Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe produce acoustic environments of extraordinary precision that required either sophisticated acoustic modeling or an inherited tradition of understanding what specific proportions do to sound in stone spaces. The architects of Chartres Cathedral did not have acoustic simulation software. They did not have the physics of wave interference formally described, yet the acoustic properties of the cathedral are not accidental. They are the product of specific dimensional choices that produce specific results that required someone to know what those choices would do before they built the building. Who taught medieval cathedral builders how to do this? Look at these technologies not as isolated curiosities, but as a group. Roman concrete that outperforms anything we can produce today. Damascus steel containing carbon nanotube structures a millennium before nanotechnology. A computing device with no technological ancestors and no successors. Rust-free iron requiring compositional control we have not recovered. Acoustic chambers engineered to alter human brain states in structures built before writing. Megalithic construction with jointing tolerances we cannot explain through any demonstrated method. In each case the knowledge was real, it was applied, it produced physical results that are still present and measurable, and in each case the knowledge is gone, not refined into something better, not superseded by a superior approach. Gone. The transmission chain broke and nothing came through on the other side. The standard historical explanation treats each break as a local event with a local cause. Rome fell, trade routes were disrupted, individual craftsmen died without teaching their successors. Each loss gets its own small story and the losses are never assembled into a single picture. But when you assemble them into a single picture, something becomes visible that the individual stories hide. The losses are not random. They are concentrated in a specific period. They follow a specific pattern. They describe a world that in the centuries before our own possessed a comprehensive technical tradition, a tradition that understood material science, acoustic engineering, astronomical computation, and energy systems in ways that our current civilization has not recovered, and that collapsed in a way that was thorough enough to leave almost no institutional memory of what it knew. The Tartarian framework holds that what we call history is not the beginning of the story. It is a chapter in the middle, that the civilization we inherited was built in the aftermath of something that ended, that the grand architecture of the 18th and 19th centuries was not the product of emerging industrial capability, but of a recovering civilization working from fragments of a knowledge base it no longer fully possessed, applying inherited solutions to problems it had partially forgotten how to understand. The physical evidence for this reading is not theoretical. It is in the Roman harbors, it is in the museum cases, it is in the acoustic resonance of stone chambers built before the wheel, it is in the iron pillar standing without rusting in the Delhi monsoon. These objects are not asking how they were built, they are asking why you do not know who built them. And the answer to that question, if you are willing to follow it, leads somewhere the official history of human civilization has never been prepared to go.